lobby. But if we get going from here, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to what is our fourth and final webinar of the May series, and hopefully you found them interesting up until this point, and hopefully today will be no different from that. Giving you a bit of a different range of things on this particular occasion this year, and you've learned a lot from sort of the new version of UCAS through to visas with a bit of art in the middle. Oh, and we have someone there on with a mic. If I can just ask for the time being, if you keep your mic on silent just for the moment, just so we can not take the interference on the line. And then I can introduce a few people to you. So this morning is Talking Heads, very specifically because we have three very distinguished heads here on the webinar with us. And if I go from top to bottom in no particular order here, if I can introduce, firstly, Dr. Sally Powell, who is the principal of MPW London. Sally, I'll come to you in a moment, but good morning. We also have Mr. Tom Caston, who is the principal of MPW Cambridge, and Mr. Mark Shingleton as well, MPW's longest standing principal over in MPW Birmingham. So 3 different locations representing 3 different colleges this morning. And the idea behind today's session is, number one, giving you a bit of an opportunity to meet all 3, which is a bit rare to have all of them in the same place at the same time, but it gives you the opportunity to meet them, the representatives of their particular colleges, and learn a little bit more about MPW as a whole, but why MPW is a bit more unique between the sites. So every site has a different personality that reflects the different personality of the principal who is running that particular school. 2, it's a chance for us to witter on a little bit and have a good chat about the state of education, because so much is happening at this moment in time in this country. It's worthwhile hearing a little bit about it and asking any questions you might have. And 3, that really is the purpose of this, is to ask any questions that you might have as well. So do pop your questions into the chat as we go along. This is your chance to ask. This is question time, or if you feel bolder, come off mute, come off your camera, or come onto your camera, I should say, and actually introduce and ask questions as live. But if I kick off here and then see what people have going through, the encouragement is for you to join in. So Sally, good morning to you. If I come to you first, do you mind just giving a very brief introduction to yourself so that people know a little bit more about you?
Yes. Good morning, James. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to MPW London. So I'm Sally Powell, and I've been the principal here at MPW London since September, so I'm quite a new principal, so I've probably come in with sort of fresh eyes and some fresh ideas and fresh energy. But I'm not new at all to the independent sixth form sector. I've been working in independent sixth form for the last 22 years, and as I'm saying those words, I can't even believe that they are true, but it is. So I've spent many years in the independent sector at sixth form. So my passion really is for this age group. It's for the 14 to 19s, and really believing in and seeing the amazing results of the small groups that we teach in and the support that we're able to give our students in really achieving their potential and kind of watching them really blossom and develop in those sixth form years.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Caston, if I come to you next, do you mind just introducing yourself as well?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name's Tom and I'm principal in Cambridge. This is my 4th year. I'm a geographer at heart, and Cambridge is a really fab place. It's an inspiring city and I feel very lucky to be here, and I think that I'll echo what Sally said about the age groups that we teach. I think that predominantly the sixth form are really beautiful years. It's where their lives start to take real academic direction. The boys and girls stop taking a list of 10 subjects and they start to really focus on the subjects that they love, and there's real passion for academic subjects here and for learning, and you can really feel that in the corridors, and I think it's a really inspiring time. And it's also the time that they become adults. They move from being boys and girls into men and women, and I feel very blessed to be part of that process in terms of steering their direction and also being part of their growth and development. So yes, that's me and that's Cambridge. Thanks, James.
Thank you. And Mark, good morning from Birmingham.
Good morning, James. Hello, everybody. I have the real pleasure of being principal in Birmingham since 2009. So obviously MPW is a big part of my life, and it's been a real privilege and an honour to have served in this leadership capacity. For those of you unfamiliar with Birmingham, I think I'm not from Birmingham originally. I grew up in Oxford and lived most of my adult life in London. I think Birmingham is one of the most exciting, dynamic cities in the United Kingdom presently. So just some things to say, really, build upon what Sally and Tom said. At the moment, we have a very interesting situation in Birmingham because we've developed a real expertise for getting kids into medical school. And at the moment, we have more internationals going to medical school than domestics, which is quite extraordinary because we're a domestic college. Last night, I went out and did bowling because our football team, which reached the final of a competition, we rewarded them. And we had the internationals and the domestics having healthy competition in the bowling. It was actually a member of staff.
Did you let them win, Mark?
Won. Well, sadly, it was a member of staff who actually won, but we'll keep quiet about that. But I'm delighted to meet everybody today.
That's like a parent not letting their child win at sport when growing up. It teaches them the right things, though, doesn't it? It teaches them the spirit of competition, healthy competition.
I think so. And as Tom made very clear, we are talking about young adults here, so it's almost a level playing field. Anyway,
Almost.
It's great to be here, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all three of you for your introductions there. And actually, you touched on points that I really want to start with, because there's a question that keeps coming round, and we had a few questions come to us in advance of this. But there's a question that's been on most people's minds for a while, which is how important is the area in which the school is? Because we're not out in green fields, okay? We're not out in the country in the sticks where you're sort of secluded off. And to the international markets, when you're sending your sons and daughters over to the UK, if you send them to a boarding school locked away in a forest, you know that there's an element more safety that comes to it. So how important is the area in which the schools are located? And if possible, just touching a little bit on what the actual virtues of the areas are that you exist in, because there's a massive misconception to what areas in the United Kingdom are based upon what people hear, what they see, and all of that. London gets sometimes the worst of that because it's so big, but the reality of London is it's actually quite small because you only exist in one or two areas of it, so it's no bigger than anywhere else. But I wonder if we can actually start in Cambridge potentially. A little bit to the area and what sort of area the schools actually are in.
I think the first thing to say is that it's a bit like when you choose university, the conversations we have with our students are what kind of city are you going to be happy in? Where are you going to feel safe? Where are you going to feel that you belong? Is it a Roman town? Is it a coastal town? It is a big, vibrant town. You know, what are you looking for? And I think that we all have different expectations and hopes and things that make us happy. And the three schools are fundamentally very similar, but we're in very different spaces. And somebody might love Cambridge and not get it in London. Equally, they might love Birmingham and really think Cambridge doesn't work for me. And that's absolutely fine. I think it's horses for courses, and they'll get a sense in whichever school they come to where they're going to be happy. And I think that for me is all I need. And I certainly don't take it personally if somebody says it's okay. You know, thanks, Tom. Nice to have met you. Cambridge is. It's a university town. It's historic. It's beautiful. It's quiet, and it's green. And you know, it doesn't need much introduction. But equally, I know there are going to be boys and girls that want a bit more. But for what, you know, we're in. You can't really see out the back of my window. It's, you know, Cambridge doesn't need that much selling. Yeah.
It doesn't really. I mean, Cambridge has the reputation, doesn't it? It's always going to benefit from having Cambridge University as the leading name. And this is said in no disrespect or no sort of generalization to the international world at all, but to the international audience out there, you often associate with what you know, and so everyone knowing of Cambridge University gives Cambridge a natural step forward. And so for some people, that is absolutely the right place. But what people really do need to understand is that whilst Cambridge is a phenomenal university, etc. The actual town has a different vibe to it. It can be very good, but it's not what everyone wants within that. And that's the great thing for me about MPW is we have different charisma and different personalities in different cities. So it's not just MPW are choosing, it is the location that you would really like. And we're also going to always be a little limited. I had a lovely question yesterday, and I'll ask you guys this as well, but what is MPW's greatest limitation? Which is always a hard question to answer, because you sit there and go, well, how do I answer a limitation? But you're answering a limitation based upon the area and the facilities in which is there. And so different MPWs do different things. Sally, what's the view in London? Because you're spoilt, if I can be honest with you. You have the brand new boarding house. You have London, whereby if you want to do something, you throw a penny, you'll find it. What sort of what's the view in London for you?
Well, you know, James, you hit it on the head when you were talking about the fact that, London, of course, you think this is a huge, overwhelming city. In actual fact, those of us who have lived in London all our lives and know it well know that it's actually really a series of villages kind of joined together by a tube network. And we are in a pretty lovely leafy village here in Kensington. It really is one of the smartest areas in London. But it is in some ways a little bit of a suburban area as well. We have many families here in Kensington who live here, who make their home here. We're around the corner from the French Lycée, so we feel very much in some ways as if we're both London and Paris kind of together. Certainly the number of patisseries and cafes in the area would give us that sense of being in Little Paris. But of course, we have just the most amazing facilities on our doorstep. We are, 2 minutes, if that, walk from the Natural History Museum, 5 minutes from the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we're a couple of tube stops into central London. So it's absolutely all on our doorstep. What I find is that the students, of course, need encouragement to go and see all the cultural things that are right here. Teenagers aren't always incredibly adventurous in terms of getting off to all the cultural events, and the boarding team are amazing at getting the students out and about to see all the things that London has to offer, and they have a really amazing programme. Socially, they also tend to be not incredibly adventurous. They tend to stay in the area. We have some nice little cafes around about. And I have to say, I've often said to students, what have you got planned this weekend? And they say, well, we're going to the cafe around the corner. And I say, well, you've got the whole of London on your doorstep. Well, we like the cafe around the corner. It feels this is a very safe area. It's a very pleasant area. And of course, they're here with their friends. So they're very lucky to have everything on their doorstep right here. Yeah.
Look, I agree with you, and I'm never ever. I absolutely admire someone who can basically coin a phrase. I'm never going to let you forget that you call South Kensington Little Paris. I've never heard it. I love the idea of it. I think that's wonderful. And that's the other great thing, isn't it? When you go somewhere, you can have as big a place as you like, but often your brain power doesn't, or your imagination doesn't exist beyond just what you know, and that's why you're never really in danger of people getting lost in London, because you're only going to get lost if you can't find your way to the end of the road and back. It's not that at all. But just touching on a point there, safety wise is often a question. Cambridge always wins out a little bit because it's sleepy Cambridge in its own way. London has sometimes a reputation of a safety factor, and I know that's going to cross into Birmingham as well. Just in London, how is it mitigated, I suppose, to exist as a college in London?
Can I jump in really
sorry.
quickly? Sorry, Sally. I spent some time with London's boarders this week as part of our internal processes, and they love it and they feel totally safe. One of the questions was, do you feel safe? And they just went, yes, it's amazing. And so I can answer that a bit for Sally. From an outsider to London, they do feel incredibly safe and they love the activities, and to go back to what you were saying before, Sally, safety doesn't feel like a problem from what I could gather from speaking to 25, 30 boarders this week.
I mean, we're lucky that we are in a very smart area of town, and so you know that's incredibly lucky. I think they feel very well supported by the boarding staff. You know, they are available to them you know, all the time, so they feel very well supported by them. Of course, we are in a big city, and like any city in the world, you do have to have your wits about you, and you do have to recognise where you know, where risk lies, where it does lie. But the boarding team are very good at talking through the students, you know, that actually it's not a great idea to sit at a cafe anywhere with your phone on the table. That's not a great thing to do wherever you are in the world. So actually talking to the kids about just ways to be sensible and to be aware is also really important. They have an app on their phone where they check in with the boarding staff. They can let the boarding staff know where they are. They can be tracked where they are. So they have an app on their phone for that. But the important thing is really that they know that there are adults there looking out for them, monitoring where they are, where they're at, and that they can come to and ask any questions if they're worried or concerned.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's very worthwhile people knowing that. I think the app is a great step forward in terms of keeping people safe here. And it needs to be said as well, the way where London exists, it exists in the embassy heartland. And what do you get when you get embassies? You get a lot of police and a lot of security presence around. So it is actually probably the most ring-fenced area of London that we could possibly have put a college in there. And over to Birmingham, Mark, and ladies and gentlemen, probably prepare yourself for the most effusive sort of description of Birmingham that you can give. But also, actually, Birmingham is maybe arguably the safest of all three. And I will give it to Mark to actually to give you a bit more of a sense as to Birmingham, the area, the safety factor and all of that.
Thanks, James. So let's just start from first principles. Birmingham is the United Kingdom's second city. In a wider context, it's not that big, but in a UK context, it's pretty sizable. And yet, the college finds itself in a village. So the college is located in an area called Edgbaston Village. It's the most prestigious part of Birmingham. I can absolutely guarantee if any of you visit the college, you'll be impressed with the immediate surroundings. The way to understand Birmingham, in my opinion, is I think it's a business city, and there's been lots of great developments happening with law firms and finance firms which have been coming here in their abundance. Strangely, and this is probably an indication of my expanding waistline, it has more Michelin restaurants outside of London than any other city. So it's become a real mecca, if you like, for food. It's got a massive foodie scene. And that actually manifests itself as well with student considerations, because the food scene for students, as our international students and domestic testify, is quite exemplary. James, he's on the money in saying that Birmingham, perhaps counterintuitively, is actually the safest. And I would actually support that thesis. I think the city of Birmingham, the part in which we are located, I mean, I grew up in Oxford, and that has a reputation like Cambridge for being absurdly safe. And yet, I would say that where the students at my college study and live, that is safer than the parts of Oxford that I could take you to in terms of the city centre and what have you. You have to come and visit it. I think perhaps, without getting too deep and sociological with you, perhaps the reason why the college is in such a safe area is that Birmingham is an area where there will be pockets of social deprivation. And if you're looking at statistics and what have you, yes, inevitably, you maybe have some issues, but our students have no connection with those areas. And those areas are actually quite far away. I think the final thing, I remember doing a webinar with, it's similar to this. And I was asked some pretty deep questions, and I'm going to get them out in the open now. And I was asked about attitudes towards race and racism and tolerance. And I made a statement then that I will stand by. I am utterly convinced that this college and Birmingham are just such tolerant, progressive cities. And maybe it's to do with its history, the former industrial hub, the post-war rebuilding of Britain, getting rid of manufacturing. But our students all say the same. It's a remarkably supportive and tolerant college and city. And that's why satisfaction levels at the college are so high.
Thank you very much indeed. Mark, I would love to go to some of these rough areas of Oxford, and I wonder if it's because Oxford is where the Bullingdon Club is that makes it distinctly less safe as a place versus Birmingham. It's I like the idea of it very much indeed.
I'll tell you what it is, James. It's actually to do, if you really want to have a serious conversation about it, it's to do with alcohol consumption.
All right.
So that's
and while being flippant there, it kind of plays to the same point that it does have quite a negative connotation that goes to it as a city versus Cambridge, actually, bizarrely enough, where it is far more straight-laced and a lot more serious in that respect, Oxford versus Cambridge. And it has been pulled out when people are considering which university to go to before, in terms of what is the culture that you're looking for. I didn't realise it extended to the city-wide as a whole. Interesting on that one, and indeed, thank you in terms of the look at the Birmingham side of things. I don't want to make this too politically charged, and there are a couple of political questions that come up in this today, but in the spirit of not ignoring the obvious, Birmingham City Council got itself a very negative reputation when it went and went bankrupt, didn't it, over not too long ago. And overseas, that in some markets, that's seen as quite a big thing. Does that actually in any way affect the college standing, anything to do with it at all? Because one thing I really want to encourage all people to do is when you're making a decision between a school, you're looking at a school and you're looking at the area, absolutely. But if the area has certain faults, it's not at the fault of the school. And sometimes it's not even relevant to the school itself. And so when we've had a little bit of this pushback in terms of what's happening in Birmingham, how is that possible? We don't want to go to Birmingham because of that. Does it affect the school, Mark, in any way, shape or form?
None whatsoever. So Birmingham's an entrepreneurial city. That's what its strength is. It's dynamic. The thing about the point you're raising there about the public sector, which is the government money and local money, which comes through taxpayers, the fact that there's probably been some mismanagement over the last 15 years in terms of how they deploy public resources has absolutely no bearing on the experience and quality of life that an international student faces in the city. It's almost like you're reading something in the news that actually you don't recognize or has absolutely no consequence for you. So if people wanted to be really probing and ask provocative questions, they say, but what about gaining access to a doctor? Absolutely no problem. The care and support we give our students, we work very closely with the accommodation team as well. Our students never have a problem getting an appointment to see a doctor if it's needed. So the functionality of the city feels healthy for us. And I think I go back to my earlier point. I think sadly, there are probably parts of Birmingham which are underinvested and suffer from social deprivation.
Lovely. I think so. Okay. Well, it's good to know that, to be perfectly honest with you, that it a lot of the time we're not really at the mercy of what goes on beyond the schools itself, and it is a point to be raised, and without again getting too political, with the general election coming up, that causes a lot of people quite a lot of disquiet as well in terms of how it's going to affect us and this and that and the other. Other than the implication on fees that everyone is aware of and what's going to happen, the actual impact of the election won't be immediately felt by us and won't be immediately felt for quite some years to come in that particular time. Thank you, Tom, for doing that. I'm going to play MPW Top Trumps with you in just a moment. So I will be going through the questions there. But just with a view to the election, and I will come to those questions, but just with a view to the election, what's your feeling as educationalists in all of this? What's your feeling in terms of what happens next? What's education as a landscape in the United Kingdom, if we talk beyond our borders? What's it going to be like? Is it going to change? Is much going to change? Or is it going to stay fairly similar? Tom, you look most confused by the question, so I'll come to you first.
Oh, I was just thinking that's one that definitely Sally should be answering first. No, I think that
there's a reason why I'm playing Jeremy Paxman. I don't have to actually answer the questions. I only get to ask them. So there we go.
I think we're on fairly stable ground. To be honest with you, you know, there's always talk, but equally, I think that A levels are considered the gold standard. IB is a growing entity in education, and that's absolutely fine. But I don't feel insecure about the future. I think the international market is increasingly important for UK schools, and I think that can only be a good thing. We talk about the diversity and inclusivity of our schools, and I think that's really critical to who we are and what we are. And I know that we all really embrace that. But as I say, I don't feel worried about, you know, there's a lot of talk about VAT. I don't know if you want to kind of dip into that, James, but that seems to be more of a local issue.
I think that is more of a local issue, and just to the international audience, probably not one that will trouble all of you too much, mostly from the consideration of what VAT actually means in the grand scheme of things. It's definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue for a lot of schools, but in terms of our approach to it, we might come back round to that one. Yeah. I'll let Sally buzz in though at this particular juncture.
I mean, I'm optimistic. I mean, fundamentally because of what Tom was saying about the gold standard of A level and the great, you know, international value that A level still has, but also because I just think that the mood music of the UK is going to change in terms of how welcoming we are to international students, and I think, you know, a rethink and a reset in how you know, brand UK promotes itself to the world, and how welcoming and open-armed we are to international students coming in is frankly well overdue. So I'm optimistic in terms of a new government coming in. I think that we will see just a resetting of our approach to the international community, and so I think it's long overdue.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
anything you would like to add?
Well, I think Sally's comments are quite wise there. I think we have to be careful, though, that we're assuming it's a done deal, that we will get a new government. I think my take on it is Britain's not an extreme country. It's a remarkably stable country. And even if you have a change of administration, actually, the continuity of experience for internationals remains. So I don't feel that bothered, if I'm brutally honest, because I think ideologically, both of the major parties in the UK are well aligned, and I certainly don't sense hostility towards international students, quite the opposite. And in terms of the education system changing, it's not going to happen. So I think our colleagues who are in on this call should be reassured that, you know, Britain's a stable country. It's one of the most stable in Europe. So
I absolutely agree with you, and that's the reason why we sort of took ourselves out of Europe, in order to continue with our stability as much as anything else. It's absolutely the case that we are stable. What you see is what you get from the press. Lies and damn lies and statistics and all the rest of it that goes into it. But what you basically see with government is theatre. What you see in Parliament is the theatre of Parliament within there. The actual ideas aren't so diametrically opposed, and particularly not within specific departments. And education is never one that really changes too much when you come in and out of it. So Mark, to your point there, yes, we probably won't get too much diversification as it comes into the new government. I'm just going to go to the floor and I just take some of the questions. I mean, James will come back to the London Underground at the back end of this, but to play MPW top trumps for a moment, chaps, could you say what proportion of UK students are at each of your colleges? Sally, what have you got? Proportion of UK students to international.
Yeah, so we are just 50-50, around about that. But what I would say is that it's a very, very cosmopolitan cohort here at MPW London, because London is a very cosmopolitan city. But yes, I would say about 50-50.
Thank you. Tom?
I would say we're a tiny bit over 50-50. I've written 50-50 in the chat, but it fluctuates. But we're talking about 40 different nationalities, and with 200 students, 220 students. So it's, yeah, to be honest with you, they just get on with it. I think it's for me, we had some international training last year from our in-country recruiters, and it just taught me that I can't consider them either international or domestic, because within our international cohort, they're so different too. It's 220 individuals. They're all a lot younger than me, so
Well, it's a good thing. That's why they're in school. Mark, over in Birmingham, you are probably our most domestic of all the college products.
Yeah, so we're over 60% domestic. This is probably the most international that we've been, but as a rule of thumb, we're normally 2/3 domestic. But at the moment, we're about 60% domestic, obviously 40% international.
Thank you, and thank you, Jackie, for your question. Just to bring into that, there was an interesting discussion last week. As the VAT question arises for quite a lot of schools, and we'll just call it a question at the moment so we don't have to delve into it, because as Mark said, the danger is to assume it's all completely done. But everyone is planning for it. And what a lot of schools are starting to do, and you're probably finding this in your markets, is new schools are coming into your markets because schools have suddenly worked out that the way of actually getting students through is to go into the international realm versus actually just relying on the domestic markets, which is what they've been doing for so long. But the domestic market is the one that's going to be hit most by VAT, and people start dropping out of it. So you're now going to be flooded with new options. This isn't in any way comment on those schools at all. What it is to do is to say that we've been doing this now for what is our 50th year, and it's about being able to know how to blend domestic students and international students together. We will always pride ourselves on being more of a UK school than an international school, no matter the balance that's within there, because when you teach, you're teaching to the UK level. Again, not a comment, it's more of an observation that when you teach to the UK level, you're teaching at a slightly more accelerated pace with a slightly more of an awareness towards the English language levels that are within there. You're providing academic English language classes as well as English classes alongside the teaching itself, because you're trying to develop people. Why? Specifically because when you come to the UK, you should want to be in a UK school, not an international school. Otherwise, there's a slight question mark as to why you're coming here. But two, you're trying to get people ready for university. And that's what MPW is probably its biggest sell within there, is it bridges the gap between school and university itself. And on the particular learning level, when you get to university, you want your students to cope. If we treat them more like UK students, they'll get there a lot quicker, and the English language comes via osmosis. I am not an educator, but to my educationalist friends there, did I say anything out of turn, or would we concur with that?
Yeah, I'm with you, James. I mean, the other thing that of course to keep in mind is that in terms of what we do as a school, and in terms of what our inspectorate expect us to do as a school, and what the expectations are, there is no distinction made between the international students and domestic students. As Tom said, they are all our students and our young people, and they are taken on, exactly the same journeys. And the journey and the focus absolutely is towards UK university. We do support some students in making overseas applications, international applications, but generally most of our cohort are being prepared for UK university, and that journey really is very much the same, whether or not they're international or domestic.
Thank you very much indeed. Silke, thank you for your question as well. Do we have spaces at all three colleges? I will just ask for yeses and nos, please, from you all, just so Silke has her answer there. Tom?
Yes, we do, but get in fast because we're filling up. But yes, we do.
Thank you. Mark, how are you looking in Birmingham?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think perhaps more specifically, it'd be lovely to actually have a chat, a dialogue about course specifics, so we can make sure we offer the best advice. As you know, MPW is very much about trying to give something a little bit more bespoke, regardless if the student is domestic or international. So yeah, happy to talk further and see if we can help career aspirations and immediate program of study.
Thank you. And Sally as well, what have you got in terms of that?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Marcus is saying there, really, that, I mean, yes, we do. We will always have a place. Courses do fill up, of course. Certain subjects are more popular than others. So latecomers to some subjects, that might be tricky. But really just echoing what Mark's saying about how bespoke our programmes are. And it really to the good of the individual student for that conversation to really take into account their interests, their skills, their strengths, their needs, and we can tailor to those needs, and that's the great benefit of coming to a college like one of the three MPW colleges.
Thank you. Right, so that segues into a few more questions that we've had in advance of this. Number one, MPW fit in terms of what kind of student works for MPW. Okay, because we're all aware that not one size fits all. We have three different colleges. How similar are we within that? What are you looking for really within the student? Can someone buzz in for that?
Happy to.
Tom, you are muted first, so to you.
I would say there is no typical MPW student. I think sometimes you meet young men and women in their 20s and they tell you where they went to school and you think, of course you went there. I can imagine you in that institution. At MPW, because the diversity, there is no photo fit student. They want to be at MPW. They choose the schools because they want to be in this particular kind of environment with small class sizes. They like the regular testing. They're academically ambitious, and they're impressive. And given the nature of the international students, they have a really beautiful independence, and it's like I said earlier, it's a real joy to be on their journeys. But I wouldn't say there's a photo fit student. They're all here for the very reason of getting to their next best thing, and you know, their journey it's a privilege for us to be a part of it. That's what I would say.
Okay. Sally, you want to buzz in?
Yes, I do. I would like to buzz in. I think that's absolutely the case, because we are able, because of our small group teaching, because we really get to know, hear, see our students as individuals. We are able to mould them in terms of their own, their own personalities and their own interests, rather than mould them in a cookie cutter style in terms of the personality of the school. We don't do that, and that's one of the incredible strengths of the school. I think if you are just to take a negative view on it for a moment, but I think if you are captain of the of the lacrosse team, if you are somebody who plays sports every weekend, or if you are involved in particular things, there's just a little bit more thought needs to go into that as to how we accommodate that. But it's actually it's not an obstacle, because we are all in places where we can connect students with those opportunities in the cities around us. So even though we are, we're in cities, actually we can connect out. So even for those students where you might think it's not an absolutely natural fit, we can accommodate those different interests and those different passions, mostly in school, but sometimes we can accommodate it out of school, help students to make those arrangements out of school as well.
Yeah, we've had international sportsmen and women who come here because they want the academic compartmentalization of their lives, and then they go and play their international sport, and I think they quite value that. So, as you say, it's we're a different kind of product in that there's not sport 5 times a week here, which there are in lots of traditional boarding schools.
Yeah,
it's more of an academic.
100%. There's another question that was in this that kind of segues into it as well, which is why. Talk to me a little bit about league tables in terms of that, because I think it plays to the points that you're making at the moment. And maybe Mark, sorry to throw you straight to this one, but in terms of league tables, what is the general view as to MPW's place within them, and why it is that we don't tend to exist within them, really?
Thanks, James. Well, if we just reflect on what both Tom and Sally have articulated to us, and I think they've encapsulated in many ways what we're about. MPW is all about context. It's a journey. And I must say, it is one of the rare professions where many of us are actually inspired by the students we work with. I've got friends who are lawyers and accountants. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about their clients in such a way. So we have this very unique experience of interacting with our young people and getting them to be a better version of themselves, whether it's pastorally or whether it's academically. The problem with the league tables, the main problem is it doesn't really reference where the student has come from. It doesn't really comment on the prior attainment. And what you'll find at MPW is our ability to help students, if you like, almost overachieve compared to what they may have been expected to have sought out. It is quite remarkable. And the league tables never get close to capturing that. The other thing to remember, of course, is like in anything in the UK, the league tables are often distorted. Whether you're talking about university, there's no government-backed league table. When you start talking about secondary schools, it's a very fragmented narrative. So I would say I'm actually quite proud of the fact that we don't see our students as statistics. We see our students as human beings, and we're about the human interest story. And I know that for our colleagues listening in, the most powerful way to really understand us is case studies. And we can provide you in abundance some of the most inspiring student stories that any education provider could offer in the UK, convinced of it. Does that help, James?
It really does, and thank you for that. I've made the point before. It's the whole, you can say whatever you want and put it into a league table. You can say whatever you want and package it in a statistic. These are very, very seldom fact checked within there, because there's very few ways of actually doing that. So, but I do know their importance when you go overseas. But the most important thing is to actually look at what we can achieve with whoever that we think to take in. And I think to the point of the question being, what's an MPW fit? It's because we're looking to see who we can help. We're a value-added provider, as we've mentioned. We can take someone, if their ability level is to go from an E to a B, then the amount of value you've added to that student's life is immeasurable within there. We don't just have to be able to quote the top level statistic to know that we've made a difference to a student's life within that side of things. And that is the case studies. And we are just about to do a big sort of social media campaign on putting case studies out there. So the encouragement to colleagues in the international community is keep looking at the Instagram pages, etc., because you'll get to know more about the students themselves, and they are really our ambassadors far more than a place in a table will ever show us, because a place in a table changes year in, year out, whereas the case studies will stand the test of time really within that one. And what have we got coming through here? So from Jackie, as far as I can tell on the MPW website, there is only a page on London's boarding, but none on Birmingham and Cambridge. Any chance of addressing that and including the boarding fees? Yes, there is. I'm just going to take that one immediately, Jackie, and then see if any of my colleagues want to buzz in on it. On the MPW website, the only reason for it having London's boarding is London is the first school, and the only one at the moment, but the first school to actually go boarding. So it's now an official boarding school within there, and therefore we can move it onto the MPW website itself because it's regulated now under MPW. We have fantastic accommodation in Birmingham and in Cambridge as well, which flies under the banner of KSS, which is Kensington Student Services. There is a view to making both of those schools MPW boarding schools as well, but that is in the process at this moment in time, and then they will migrate onto the MPW website. In the meantime, I will refer you over to the Kensington Student Services website, where there is a link from the MPW website across to it. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of MPW, so therefore it does pertain to us, but it will give you the boarding sense to Birmingham, Cambridge, and all things fees related. But to the specific recruiter in your area, and I think James has just popped that into the chat for you as well, to the specific recruiter in your area, those questions are best addressed, and they can send you over any number of brochures and links and QR codes and everything that will give you an interactive look at those facilities. Does anyone want to take any points on accommodation before I move to the next question? No, lovely. A-levels versus foundation. Who wins in the big grudge match of A-levels versus foundation? That's usually the international audience that will come through at a certain age level. Where would we be looking at there? What sort of student is right for the A-level, and what sort of student would benefit from the foundation course? Tom?
Oh, I get the hard ones. A-levels are over 2
I
years.
thought that might be an
simple...
easy one for you, actually, Mr. Caston. But there we go.
No, I like this question. A-levels are over 2 years, and as I alluded to earlier, it's one of the most beautiful parts of your education journey. It's when you specialise, you have time to really immerse yourself in the subjects you're passionate about and that you're proving to have a real ability and love for. And I think that that it's a really lovely couple of years. A foundation is a 1 year more intensive means to an end. You know, the education is still there, they're still learning and still fulfilling, but I think it's more of a means to an end in my mind. And I think that you have to be very ready for a very intensive year to do the foundation, but also it will open doors, and so both are good, but I think it's individual specific. I meet some students who the foundation is wonderful for and gets them to their next thing and continues them on their journey. But equally, there are some A-level students that have a really lovely time immersing themselves in their subjects over 2 years and taking a bit more time over that. Does that sound fair, Sally, Mark?
I think the thing you're on the money, Tom. I think the thing I would add, though, of course, is we run the NCUK program in Birmingham, and it's a remarkably successful academic program. We've got a very good track record in getting kids into some quite elite universities. But let's make no mistake about it. When you do a foundation program, you're going to be studying with international students. So your statement of intent, it's a different proposition. When you say you want to study A-levels, there are two things to consider. One is, despite the strengths of the foundation and the NCUK program, and there are numerous, you will definitely have more choice in terms of your destination with A-levels. And the second thing to consider is you will be on a day-to-day business rubbing shoulders with domestic students. So I think there's a cultural consideration as well in the choice of curriculum. It isn't just academic or time span. I do think that if you've got culturally open-minded students who really want to receive the benefit of a domestic college, A-levels are stronger. Having said that, last night, as I was boring you with, I was playing bowling with our international and domestic. There were several NCUK students within that. So they mix with our domestic, but it is definitely easier for A-levels because they're sharing academic experiences every day with domestic kids.
I think it's really worth thinking about the nature of the child. I mean, we're not just teaching the 2 years that we're teaching A-level. Of course, we're not just teaching A-level. We're teaching young people, how to become young adults. And so the maturity of the students, speed is not always the best way forward. You need to think about the time that it's going to take for that young person to develop their skills and develop into the young adult that's going to go off to university and going to be really well equipped to make the very, very best use of that opportunity and to really exploit that opportunity. So absolutely, in terms of the fact that these are two culturally very different experiences, but the time for me is also really important because some young people they really need that time, need those 2 years to develop. before they head off to uni.
100%, 100%. Good. Yeah, ultimately, it's a question of what do you want at the back end of it. Jackie, don't all colleges offer the NCUK Foundation programs? Yes, indeed we do. We have the NCUK in all 3 of the campuses because you're giving people the flexibility of choice as to where they'd like to be studying within there. However, one thing that is the skill of the recruiters as much as anything is to also guide a little bit more on the relative strengths of each of the schools and which programs that they tend to focus on. Again, not saying anything about the other colleges here, but for example, if we were to pull out Birmingham, Birmingham's exceptionally strong on the medical school side of things. And Mark, actually something came up in the board meeting last week in terms of some of the things you were saying about international students and medical nowadays. Probably quite a good point to throw in here at this moment, because medical school international, very bad reputation in the UK in terms of progression rates, but you had a bit of a success on that one.
Yeah, so I alluded to it earlier on when we first started talking to colleagues, but nationally we've had a reputation for getting domestic kids into competitive courses such as medicine and dentistry, and that's still the case. But what's happened is, the first time we actually have more international students getting into medical school than domestic students, which is quite extraordinary. And last night, 3rd time I mentioned the bowling. Walking to the bowling, I was chatting to one of the students there who's got an offer from St Andrews for medicine. I mean, I can't even begin. I'm going to be so understated about this, and I'm not. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be understated. It is the most extraordinary achievement. This is a 2-year A-level student who's international, and he has an offer from St Andrews. Even getting a Brit into such a school would be an extraordinary experience. The fact it's an international, and he's had a generous offer. They've been so impressed with the personal statement and the reference we wrote, they've actually given him a very obliging offer. So even in real time, we're getting these wonderful stories coming through. It's quite remarkable. So, and the colleague who asked about NCUK, we're getting NCUK students into medical school. It's a fact. I think this year we've got 4 or 5 with offers, which is an extraordinary achievement. So we know what we're doing in terms of offering the expertise that our students need.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating point, to be honest, and I'm very conscious of time, but there are so many different avenues to take this down. I mean, the medical school conversation could be one for quite a good number of minutes, to be perfectly honest with you, because the changing nature and face of what's happening in the medical school side of things, whether there's enough places, is there going to be more places, how these are being pulled back, it's just very impressive in the landscape that we have at the moment. I keep asking any questions that you have up until the time. If there's anything else people would like to know, I have a quick one in the top trump side of things again. Just guesses from you all, please. Someone once asked, in terms of A-level versus IB for the UK, which what would we sort of suggest to that? I actually want to do this in terms of broad numbers, because we've already suggested, Tom, that the A-levels are the gold standard, and they are within the United Kingdom, and the foundation courses are pretty strong too. What proportion of A-levels are awarded per year versus IB? Tom, you don't need to look shocked. This is a pure guess within there. I'm going to just take a guess from the colleague. Sally, what would you suggest would be? How do you think that's weighted?
Oh, UK students doing IB as opposed to A-level, are you asking?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, gosh, okay. I'm terrible at these things, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to say 80% of students, 85% of students do A-level, and 15% of students do IB.
Very good. I'll come to that point in a moment, Mark. But what's your guess for A-level versus IB?
To me, to Mark.
Yep, to Mark.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if it was Tom.
Right.
Well, we know that the IB is an international qualification which comes out of Ooh, because we have I know you haven't asked the question, but if you want me to be hyper exacting about this, I would say 70% of UK kids do A levels, then maybe 20%, 24% do a vocational equivalent, and then a very small proportion do the IB of British kids. And maybe 5-6%, definitely less than 10, is my opinion.
Not bad. Tom?
I'm not competitive, so I wasn't just trying to Google it. Or maybe I was, but it wouldn't tell me. I would agree with Mark. I think it's 8%.
Yeah. You're not too far off. The ratio is between 8 and 9 to 1 in terms of heavily weighted in favour of A levels. The point being, to the colleague who asked the question on email before the start of this, if you want to go to university in the United Kingdom and you're considering coming over to the United Kingdom, you're going to get a lot further with A levels than you are with IB. Also, A levels stand on their own as
James. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. I just need to point this out to colleagues. If you look at the scores that UK universities require for the IB, it is so erratic and irregular. University of Birmingham, top 10, top 15 UK university requires 32 points. University of Warwick, top 10 university requires 38. With A level as a currency, you know where you stand. With the IB, because British universities do not understand the IB, they don't get it. And that's why you've got such irregularities between them. King's College London, for its top courses for law, will want 35. UCL, 38. LSE, 39. Southampton, top 15 university, jumps down to 32. It's so erratic. Edinburgh, 41. There's a colloquial expression in English, it's a bit nuts, but it certainly is. The admissions policy for IB is irregular. So for me, it's a non-starter.
Thank you very much. That is absolutely right. And we're pretty much at the end here. Irem, predicted grade issues are more common with IB in your opinion. 100%. 100%. Everything is based on the average at the end. It becomes really difficult to actually get this. And I do encounter quite a lot of students as well who will always say that I can't get my teacher in one to give me the 7 I need, but in the other 2 I've got the 7, and it's very, very difficult to get any sort of commonality going through. Right. Any more questions coming through? And whilst I just take any last questions, so the question on MPW's football team: who was the best? Who was the best in the recent tournament? Bragging rights, please, Mark Shingleton.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to serve you all and to work with such distinguished international and domestic kids. You see, it's about the harmony, guys.
100%.
We weren't the best.
Tom, in terms of the record and results, does that speak to your point there, or actually is that you just being bullish at the very end in support of your college?
No, we were terrible. We had a good day. We turned up.
It's the spirit of participation, as Mark.
I think we won the raffle.
We won the raffle. Look, thank you very much all. I mean, the whole purpose of this morning, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you get the sense that MPW is a name, and we follow very similar methodologies in all 3 of our colleges, because we come from the original starting place, which is small group tuition, and to be able to offer education for a variety of different students from a variety of different backgrounds to bridge that gap from non-standard schools to university. But in terms of each of the 3, there is a different personality and a different style there that comes down from the top, and this was a great opportunity to be able to meet the representatives, the ambassadors of their particular colleges. So Sally, Tom and Mark, thank you so very much for your time this morning, and to everyone else out there, thank you for joining us for the May webinar series. We've really enjoyed having you in all this. They are of course recorded, so dip back into it. If any questions came from this, you can always revert back. I'm sure each of the principals would take an email and a conversation at another point from you as well, but you also have the MPW recruiters in your regions in order to be able to talk through anything within there. There's still still time. We still have June, July, and a little bit of August before we are completely oversubscribed to it. So in the meantime, do keep suggesting your students to us, and we'll do our level best to help. Have a very good summer if we don't hear from you before. All the very best.
Fantastic, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, James. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye all.